good crowd on. So hello again. I will say, if you haven't signed up for receiving the instructions for the class and the picture that we draw, or the sketch that I send you, you can send me an email. My email is wildc188@gmail.com. So thank you for joining. My name is Cathy. I'm the art instructor. I do this for free because it's the right thing to do. There's lots of people out there that wouldn't be able to experience and explore art and see what their talents were if it wasn't offered for you. It is offered through Creating Connection. Both Troy and myself offer this service for you to enjoy and to take part in. There also are acrylics classes offered once a month. They are paid for, so it's $15 for the class, really, for an art class to learn how to do acrylics. It's fairly inexpensive. It's just, it's another thing that's offered through the art program. I'm all in, so I'm here to serve you and to teach you what I know, and hopefully you learn some new tips and tricks and have fun with it. And so our picture is a beautiful sunset. Is a flight of birds in the sunset. I hope you like this one. Next week, I'm just going to do an abstract. So we've just got some birds in a tree. So we'll change it up a little bit. Well, it's not always scenery that I do. Sometimes I do animals. Sometimes I do pottery. Sometimes I do flowers. So I have a number of different ideas in mind for all of you, which I really hope you love. I love to teach art, so I'm glad that you're with me. So I like to get into art mode before I start. I just do 3 deep breaths. I hold it at the top of the breath, look around my room, find something that I like, something that makes me smile, something that brings me to right here, right now. So I hold my breath just momentarily, thinking about that, give myself a smile, and then release that breath and really drop my shoulders down. That opens up this area, and any tension that you have in your neck, it will help release some of that. So this is also a technique you can use throughout the day for a number of different scenarios that you might be in. So with that, let's start. We'll take our first deep breath in and hold it. Look around, find something makes you smile, give yourself a smile, makes you feel warm inside, and release. Lots to do in a second or two, but I'm sure you're capable. We have drawn our card also for halftime, so that's an affirmation that will apply to all of us. So second deep breath in, and hold it just for a second, and smile and release. Just really let that go. And our third deep breath in, and hold it, smile and release. There we go. So that'll give us a little bit of energy, get a little bit of fluids moving, get us focused on what we're looking at right now, the artwork. Anyways, with that having been said, we're going to work with cobalt blue, medium yellow, alizarin crimson, which is red. So if you don't have alizarin crimson, if the names that I throw out there, if the names that I throw out there are tricky for you, if you don't have an alizarin crimson, if you have red, if you don't have cobalt blue, if you have blue, if you don't have a medium yellow, just yellow. So that's fine. Raw umber is brown and black. And if you don't have black, you can mix a couple of colors together to get black, or you can use a Payne's gray. We're also going to use a fine liner today. So it's up to you, whatever size you want to use, or if you're comfortable using just straight black with the brush, then please feel free to use whatever talents you have. So lots of talking instead of painting. I'm sure you want to paint. So let's get to it and let's have some fun. I use brushes, any number of brushes. I say 0 to a 6. I do have a bigger brush. I think it might be a 9. This is just a little bit heavier. It'll hold a little bit more water, but I have just small brushes, nothing too fancy. If you do need to buy brushes, buy what you can afford. I don't encourage you to go out and spend a lot of money to get going. just whatever you can afford. So I'm going to turn my camera around and you'll see this is the sketch that I have sent out. If you haven't put every detail in there, that's okay. We're going to add to what is there anyways. So let's have some fun with this. We're going to start. I'd like you to have some paper towel on hand as well. We're going to use paper towel to create our sun. So you will need, if you have a napkin is fine. Kleenex I don't find works quite as well. With my larger brush, I'm just going to get situated here with water. I don't want to dump anything. I do like to keep or have on hand 2 containers of water. I'm not advertising any specific product, but I do like 2 containers of water. I have my neighbors collect those for me. They save them up. So if you don't have a way to get a couple of little water buckets, ask a neighbor or a friend, and I'm sure they'll be happy to hold a couple for you rather than recycle, which you're doing anyways, you're recycling. So with this picture, I'm going to start with yellow. So in this section at the center of my page and below it, I'm going to put in yellow. So I'm just wetting my brush, going into my yellow. I'm going to paint on yellow, just like a sun. And then I'm going to trail that yellow, just sort of like a little question mark, maybe, not a question mark, a little bubble. And while that's on there and it's still wet, I'm making a little ball with my paper towel. It's a dry paper towel. And I'm going to press at the top of my yellow and take some paint off. And if your paint isn't coming off easily, just dampen it a little bit. And we just want a little white spot just where our sun is. And we want a little spot down below in where the water is. So we're just removing a little bit of paint. So you can see there's a spot there where there's no more paint, where it's been removed, and some in the water. This is the reflection in the water. So this is a step-by-step watercolor class where we're just going to go through step at a time, one little piece, then the next, and then the next. It's fairly slow moving, and I find that works best. Then we can move from area to area without ruining any other spots in our picture. If you find I'm going too fast, go ahead and ask me, open up your mic and ask me just to slow it down a little bit, and I'm quite happy to do that. And there also is no need for perfection in this. So no 2 pictures are going to look alike. If you've been afraid to try painting before, this gives you an opportunity to try and just have some fun with it. Just relax with it and let the paints do whatever they're supposed to do. So the next color we're going to go into is the alizarin crimson. If you have alizarin crimson, it's or red. So we're going to go right over to the side of this mountain or rocks, right across, just about the same distance, and then just trail a little bit of that crimson, alizarin crimson, just off to the edge. But I am watering down my alizarin crimson. If I put on straight alizarin crimson, which is really dark, I don't want it quite that dark. So I'm going to add water and just soften that out. And the lightest part that I've got, a pinky hue that's down the end here, that's down the end. That's what I'm going to use, and I'm just going to put that around the outside of my sun, right to those rocks, just right to the yellow. I can blend it in a little bit. And I'm just going to trail a little bit off to the edge and just a little bit in the water. So again, that's very soft. And as I mentioned before, I like to go from section to section, letting things dry so that I don't disturb. We are going to put the blue sky and the blue water, but before we do that, we're going to work on our sand down below. So this is the sand at the very bottom. There is a white ridge in between. We're going to leave that white. We'll come back and do some details in there. But right now, at that bottom line is going to be our sand. So I'm using raw umber, which is brown. So raw umber is a brown color. And you can see that if I start to move that around, I get lights and darks. And that's the effect that we want in the sand. We're not looking for a complete solid color. Sand isn't ever one color. It has lots of different colors, lots of variety. So have fun with that bottom part. There's my sand. You can see it's not all one color. I've got lights and darks throughout, and I'm going to take that right to the bottom, right across the bottom of my canvas. And I'm just using short strokes. If you want to do a solid line, one big stroke, that's fine. And I'm just filling in all the white. And as you see, there are some lights and darks. I can actually go back in with a little bit darker raw umber. Just put in some extra little markings. Because that's wet, that's going to blend a little bit. I'm just looking for a beach. And you can take that raw umber again, just on the tip of your brush. And I'm still using a fairly large brush, but it doesn't matter if you're using a smaller brush. And I'm just going to put a few little markings here and there, just little tiny, tiny dots, nothing too specific. I'm not looking for anything that looks like road lines, or it's just up and down, just a few little dots. It's just some of the sand that's going to show through when we put our water in there. Or our wave motion, our foam in there. So we want a little bit of sand in there as well. So it's just a few markings, nothing too specific. You can see none of them look identical. If you start to make identical looking marks, you can turn your canvas upside down and your brain will see it differently, and you'll paint a little bit different. And remember when you're doing this, that this is just a piece of paper. Nothing to get too stressed about. And now we'll go back and we'll move up to our water. Is cobalt blue. It's a very soft looking blue. I've got a little bit of water on my brush. If I took just straight paint, it would be very dark, but with a little bit of water, it gets quite soft looking, and we'll actually make a little bit of clouds in our sky just by taking a paper towel. We can start to make some cloud marks. So if I want some clouds in my sky, I can just use a little bit of paper towel and lift off a little bit of that wet paint. So let's go ahead and we'll put our sky in, and then we'll make some clouds. And your clouds may not look the same as my clouds, and that's okay. They're not all supposed to look identical. I've got my cobalt blue, putting it in my sky. I'm coming right to that pink, right? I'm going to just come around those rocks at the side. I could go over, it won't really matter because they are going to be a silhouette, so they're going to be black. And I'm taking that right over to the outside edge, right up to the corner. Filling that all the way in, all the way across, right to that pink or crimson. And I do want that to blend a little bit, so I'm just using a little bit of water on my brush just to soften that edge. So just clear water will soften your edges. And if you do find they start to get a little bit of pooling, you can actually use your paper towel and just tap off any extra pooling. It just will pick that up. And before I get to the water, I'm just roughing up my sky a little bit. I want it to look a little bit like a windy day. And then with my paper towel, I'm just going to make a few clouds in my sky. So I've actually made a nice cloud right where the bird is. So that bird will really show up when I paint it. Another one near the other bird. And then maybe just a few over to the side. So just by using paper towel, just by touching on wet paint, it gives you the opportunity to create that cloudy sky effect. And if you find this is stressing you, just take a deep breath. Take a deep breath. It's just a piece of paper. And while we're at it, let's go ahead and we'll finish the bottom. We'll do the water. I'm doing the same color blue. We are going to differentiate between the top and the bottom, between the sky and the water as we move a little bit farther. But for now, I'm just using the same color blue, the cobalt blue, just putting in the water. And again, if you find it's pooling, you're getting a little bit of extra water. I'm on an easel, so the paint naturally runs down. So I'm just tapping lightly on my edge just to lift off that extra. And I'm going to move over to the other side and also fill that in. And I'm going to that line. So I'm leaving that white line in the center. You see, I'm leaving a space because that's where my water is meeting the shoreline. So I'm going to put the look of a wave or a foam that comes up as the water hits the shoreline. So I'm leaving that yellow. If it turns a little bit green because I've got blue in there, that's okay. Now, if I want to, now I'm just going to tap a little bit extra pooling at the bottom here. So I'm just going to tap a little bit of that, just soak up a little bit of that extra. I don't want it quite so dark at the bottom. And it doesn't have to be equal or even your colors throughout. It is water. Water moves. It goes at different temperatures at different times. So we'll have different colors in it. But we're going to try to make this the cloud reflection that is in the sky in the water. So my clouds are going up. So that means that as a reflection, my clouds need to come down. So I'm just using paper towel again in my water, just a little bit of cloud coverage, just showing those clouds. Now we are going to be putting some reeds over top, so not to worry too much or get too involved in your clouds and your water. We are going to put the reeds, which will disguise some of it or change the look. So you won't see everything that's in the background. And one last piece before we move on, I'll read the card for half time. But before I do that, we're going to go back to that cobalt blue and we're going to create that horizon line. So underneath, right from side to side, I'm going to create my horizon line with the cobalt blue. So I've already drawn that line in. So I'm just going to fill that line in right across my picture. And if I find that line just a little bit darker than I want it to be. So I'm just putting a little bit of fresh water on there. I'm just going to tap that off with paper towel just to soften that a little bit. That's the same color, that's cobalt blue, but because you're using more paint than water, it will look a little bit darker. So that's going to create our visual horizon line. And you can soften it just with a little bit of water if you feel the need. So it was already dry, so I'm putting a fresh line of cobalt blue right across the horizon line. Yep, so that's wet on dry. So you can change that, you can move it around. This is the beauty of watercolor. It really is easy to lift off and move and change colors. So we're at half time already, believe it or not. We have made it halfway through. So the card today is an affirmation card. It says, love yourself enough to set boundaries. Your time and energy are precious. You get to choose how you use it. You teach people how to treat you by deciding what you will and won't accept. Repeat this affirmation when you feel stressed today. The boundaries I create allow me to shine for myself and for others. So I'll just read that again. Love yourself enough to set boundaries. Your time and energy are precious. You get to choose how you use it. You teach people how to treat you by deciding what you will and won't accept. Repeat this affirmation when you feel stressed today. The boundaries I create allow me to shine for myself and for others. So at this point, we have our background done. We can move that water around. We can give it a little bit of energy. We are going to, just with that, the yellow in the water moving off to the right a little bit, gives the impression that it's a windy day. So now we're going to start to create our branches, our green, or I say greenery, but it is going to be black that's growing in the front, in the forefront. So I'm using black, just straight black with a brush. And I'm just going to, I've got the lines drawn already. So starting with the center, I'm just going to paint up that branch. Just going to give it a little bit of detail. So this is the part where you've done your background and you're going to be looking and saying, oh no, I'm going to be putting something in the very middle of my picture. What if I do it wrong? There's going to be lots of branches that we're going to do, that there'll be a distraction. They're not all going to be the same. And if you need to just, again, take a deep breath, it's going to be beautiful. So just trust in yourself and your ability. You can do it. So I'm just looking at some of the larger ones, just coming up. And as I hold my brush, when I hold my brush firmly at the bottom, and as I bring it up, when I come to the top, I just let go, and that's what creates that point at the top. So you can practice that on a separate piece of paper, or you can practice it on your canvas, but push down and then let go. And when you let go, we'll make that point at the top. So all of those little branches that are there, we're just going to give them some detail. Just going to, you can do them with black marker if that's what you like, with a fine point. I'm using a black paint and a brush. And we will come back and do a little bit of grasses in the foreground, right in the front. So we'll use our card, our gift card, to do those. So if you've got those on already, we'll stop at that point and just leave our picture. We'll leave what we've got painted on. We're not going to do any more down the bottom yet. We'll come back up to our horizon line, which should be dry now. And we're going to paint in that little mountain or a pile of rocks over on the side. I'm just doing that in black. I'm just going to let those other reeds dry. As I said, we'll move from one part of the picture to another. If you want to make this look more mountainous, you can do extra. We're also having that jut out just into the water. So we've got a little bit of a rocky edge. And we've got a few in the background. So we're going to do those little rocks as well. So just a few in the background. And this is your artwork, your picture. If you want more or less rocks, then that's entirely up to you. And another one on the side over here. And I like to work with uneven or odd numbers. So I've got 1, 2, 3. Your brain can naturally compute if I have 2, but when I add a third one, it makes the eye linger a little longer. And that's the objective of your art, is to have the viewer look a little bit longer. And we've got some rocks off the side in the water. Just a few rocks. And you can give a little extra just coming off if you like, some smaller ones. Let's save a little bit of that Payne's gray. We're actually going to water down a little bit of our black. So save some of your Payne's gray, because now we're coming in the front and we're going to paint those little rocks that are just in the front. So you see that's quite a bit lighter. That's using black, but with water added. So I'm just making little rocks. There's a few already drawn in there. So we're just going to paint those in. They need to kind of peek out between the reeds. They're just at the shoreline, but they're just peeking out a little bit. And we don't want those quite as dark. They are black, but watered down. So just lighter. And if you've got your rocks in, we're going to work on this foam. So the white part that has the little brown spots that we put in there, we're now going to put we're still going to cobalt blue, the same blue that's in your water, the same blue that's in your sky. We're keeping it consistent. But I'm using my brush. I'm just using the tip of my brush. And I'm just putting in some little dots in and around. Now I do want it to be lighter. I don't want it to be quite that dark. I want it, so thin out your cobalt blue. You want it to be fairly light. And you want it to look like there's water, a little bit of water, just with a little bit of foam. So still cobalt blue, watered down. And you see I'm just touching my canvas, just letting that water, that blue colored water, just sort of spread out around in amongst the brown rocks or pebbles that have come in with the tide. And I'm going to take that right down to the bottom corner. So I will still want to have white showing, because that's what's going to give that look of foam. And I'd like to let that dry. So I'm going to go up into my sky where my seagulls are. So when I put, and we're just going to use black paint. So when I put black paint on my brush, I'm going to twist my brush so that I only have paint on the tip. And I can practice on a separate piece of paper to come up with a really fine line. So as light as possible. But if I get a whole bunch on, when I try to do a light line, it gets thicker and thicker. So when I twist my brush and only have paint on the tip, it allows me to make really fine lines. So with straight black, I'm going to find my seagulls in the sky. I've drawn them in already. I'm just going to paint their wings and their bodies. So there are 3, again, back to that odd number. And take a deep breath if you need to. You can practice drawing your birds when you're on the phone even, works very well. Distracted and a little more relaxed. Sometimes my seagulls are perfect and sometimes they're not. And you know, it's just the way it works. So you can practice and practice. So we're past our seagulls. We're now going to move back down into the reeds. We have our little bit of water and a little bit of rock showing in between where the water's come in and wash. Some has come onto the shore. We've got our nice sand with different variety of colors. And now we can start to create more reeds. So again, you can take your brush and roll it and just get a little bit of paint on the tip, which will give you a nice thin line. If thin lines aren't working for you, you can use a fine line marker and you can make some nice lines that way, which is up to you. If you use a marker on your watercolor, you need, if you were going to put your artwork in a show, you need to call it mixed media because it's no longer just watercolor, it's now ink. But if you're just giving your friend a card or you're just painting a picture because you just want to practice, then it's a good way to get some nice fine lines as well. And the lines don't have to be straight. Reeds in the wild, in nature, are not straight. And they also cross over each other. So they don't all go in one straight line. Some cross over another, going the opposite direction. So have some fun building your beach. And some curl, we got a little curl there. And sometimes little parts fall off, so you can put in little tiny dots here and there if you like, which adds to your picture. So there are lines that are drawn that you would have had in the diagram or the sketch that was sent to you, but feel free to add your own embellishment on there, put your own creativity. And there are some of these reeds that are coming from the left-hand side that don't touch the sand. You don't, well, they're coming from the sand, but further up, so you don't see that part of them. So they'll just come right out from the side of your picture. And there's no rule against putting little dots here and there in your picture wherever you feel you want to put them. Just little seed pods that are falling off. And I also mentioned that we're going to use the card, a gift card or credit card or whatever card you've got to make little grasses in the sand. So I'm going to put a little bubble of black. It's wet paint. It's not overly wet, but it's wet enough. And this is just a card that's expired, but it's been used. So I'm just going to take my card, the corner of my card, and just pull up some of the grasses. I've got a little bit of shadow in a little bit of a dark spot in the middle, which is just fine, which is pretty natural to what you would see on a sandy beach. I'm going to do 3. So there's another one that I'm going to put down here a little bit bigger, just off to the right a little bit. And again, they don't all go the same way, and some cross over the other. And when I pull, sometimes they get a really great, clear, white looking spot where the paint is lifted. You see, and it shows a nice white mark. And that is pretty natural looking too. So remember that they don't all go the same way. And this takes a little bit of practice to do, but it's a fun thing to, interesting way to move your paints. So again, I'm just going to put a little bit of grass, smaller area, shorter grass. So you can have fun with it. If you feel you've put in too many and you want to try it again, next time you wouldn't put in quite as many, or you wanted to change the direction, that's what the recording's for. So don't think that you've done anything wrong. And sometimes on the ends of these little branches, you just have almost like a bulrush effect. So I like to put just on the ends of some of them, just a little bit of growth, a little bit of a ball, just adds to the look. And again, if some of those have got too light and you just want to darken them up with your fine liner, go ahead and use that. You can darken them up a little bit, give them a little bit more detail. Lastly, before we finish up, we want to ground these. So they look like they're growing out of the middle of nowhere. So we want to give a little bit of roughage or earth. So I'm using my raw umber just at the base of them. A little bit of raw umber and a little bit of water. I'm just so they don't look like they're growing out of the middle of nowhere. Just going to ground them a little bit. So just on the bottom, just here and there. You don't need to do the whole bottom, but we'll just do a few just to give them a little bit of a solid footing. So remember, if you need to, just take a deep breath. One last thing. Well, we're going to sign it, but before we sign it, I'm going back into my cobalt color, which is my watercolor. And underneath my rocks, I'm going to put a little bit of cobalt blue. Just a little bit of blue. Just the rocks off to the right-hand side. And I can just rub those a little bit just to give it a little bit of energy. Not too much. And definitely not so much that I lose my cloud. I need to bring my cloud back in. I made it disappear. So I'll just pick that back up again. And it is important that you sign your art to identify that you've done this work. It's up to you where you decide to put that. Thanks, Damaris. And so wherever you decide to sign, I like to sign as part of my picture. I like to keep it in, still in the picture. There we go. So thank you so much for coming on today, for painting with me and being with other like-minded artists. Hopefully you got some tips and tricks and had some fun learning new things with this. So have a lovely day, everyone. Thank you for joining. Have a good week. I'll see you next week.